All right, ecology at long last. The final section of this course where we're going to look at interactions between organisms and their environment. We're going to look at these at different scales here, increasing complexity. So from organisms themselves, individuals, to populations, to communities, then up to ecosystems, landscape, and global levels. Okay, we're going to look at how ecology and evolution play off of each other and how climate has so much to say about organisms' ecology. So, interactions between organisms and environment. So, what is an environment? We can break it down into two major parts. We've got the abiotic and the biotic. Okay, so looking at this picture here, it's basically everything you see and a bunch of stuff you don't see also. Abiotic stuff, pretty standard. Temperature and rainfall. All right, so those are the two things that we first think of when we're talking about climate, right? Which is precipitation and temperature. Okay, but it involves other stuff too, like seasonality. Does this particular spot on Earth have strong differences between seasons? How frequent are droughts? All right, what's the pH of the soil? How about the cation exchange capacity? What about 1 meter over from there? Is it different? Okay, so how heterogeneous is the soil? How heterogeneous is the water? Okay, we can look at altitude, mineral composition, the bases in the soil, solar radiation, salinity, depth, aerosol density, air pressure, CO2 concentration, stuff you probably don't think about when you just look at a picture. Okay, but an environment also includes biotic stuff, the living things, and everything they contribute to it. So all the species that are present, okay, the amount of competition for resources, predator-prey interactions, how fast organisms turn over carbon, okay, how much primary productivity is going on, so how much sunlight is getting turned into sugar, okay, evolution rates of different organisms, whether there are pathogens present or parasites, okay. So all of this stuff goes into environment and it gets really complicated really fast. We'll start out looking at organismal ecology. So just kind of go through these different, this hierarchy of complexity and kind of look at the sorts of questions that happen. So organismal ecology is how an individual organism interacts with its biotic and abiotic environment. Pretty simple. I mean, it's complicated, but this is as simple as ecology gets. So seen here, we've got some roly-polies, little pill bugs. Okay, they're moving around randomly. They're responding to moisture and light. Okay, this is one of those examples of kinesis, one of those animal behaviors. Okay, so they stop moving when they get to a nice dark moist spot. All right, that's organismal ecology. Bottom right there, we got a bear doing something it shouldn't be doing, which is waking up too early. Okay, so you might ask questions like, why is that bear coming out of torpor, out of its hibernation ahead of time, right? What environmental factors contributed to that for that organism? And then we've got apples being attacked by a fungal pathogen. Okay, so we're looking at the ecology of the apples in this case. So just the organism, how it interacts with the environment. Okay, another example, we got coral reefs. So different species of corals bleach at different rates, different temperatures, that kind of thing. So we go from 1 year to the next here in the Gold Coast of Australia, and we've got healthy corals moving to totally dead. Okay, what is it about the environment that caused this organism to respond in this way? Well, rising temperatures in this case. All right, so next up, from organismal, we move on to populations. Okay, population is a bunch of the same organisms in one spot that can interact with each other. Okay, in particular, that can share genes with each other. Okay, so population ecology looks at things that influence populations. So one step up from the organismal level, we're looking at a bunch of the same organism same type of organism in a given area. So things like changes in population size or changes in population fitness. We can track alleles through populations over time, look at how organisms are distributed. So here on the left, we've got immigration and emigration. We've got birth and death rates. Okay, those are all things that apply to a population. So this goes into endangered species research or management. It goes into like game management for issuing hunting tags, that sort of thing. On the right, we've got population of E. coli that we saw at the very beginning of the semester. So here we're looking at how alleles spread through the population over time. Okay. Other sorts of stuff we talk about when we're talking about population ecology is kind of life history and population size, growth rates, that kind of stuff. All right, so over time, at the top there, we've got paramecium population. And so this was done in like a petri dish, basically. You put some paramecia in there, and it's a ciliate protist, and you track its growth. So the population size over time, you can see it leveling off nicely. Bottom left, you've got Daphnia, which is the water flea, okay, and it's not behaving the same way. All right, it should be following that red line, but the little black dots, the real data, it overshot its carrying capacity and had to come back down. Okay, so it had a population crash. And you can see the song sparrow population over time in the bottom right, where they're just counting the number of females because that's the reproductive population. And you can see that it has spikes and crashes over and over and over. All right, that's the kind of thing that goes into population ecology studies, the sorts of things that population ecology looks at. Getting a bit more complex is community ecology. Now, community is a bunch of different populations in the same spot. All right, so here we're looking at things like food webs. Okay, we're looking at community structure. We're looking at competition for resources, parasitism, all that good stuff. Okay, pictured here are some communities. We've got a coral reef community. We've got a fungal and plant community, and then your digestive tract, which is actually a community of hundreds or even thousands of different bacteria living in your gut. Okay, so community ecology is used for modern medicine when you're looking at like gut health, that kind of thing. Moving on up, we've got ecosystem ecology. So we're getting bigger scale here, a bunch of different communities, physically larger scale that we're looking at here. And ecosystem ecology is concerned largely with the flow of energy and elements between populations and communities. Okay, so we're looking at how, say, a plant community interacts with an animal community or a soil biotic community. We're looking at how carbon flows from the sun to the plants to the soil organisms, gets leached out into the water. Okay, and we could say that this is a mesic ecosystem, something that's next to a river. All right. One really cool ecosystem ecology study I like to think about is pictured at the top right here. This is Hubbard Brook Long-Term Ecological Research System. All right, so this takes place up in the mountains in the northeast US, and the thing about experimenting on ecosystems is that it's often really difficult to get permission to destroy part of an ecosystem, but that's kind of what you have to do, right? If we're working at that level, it's not like we can have a petri dish that we add some chemicals to and see what happens. We got to do that to an entire ecosystem. So basically these researchers got a grant and with their university bought an entire ecosystem that they could play with. Right, and you can see here that they've done different treatments. Right, so they've clear cut some of this ecosystem. Okay, they've done regrowth experiments in there, and basically it's all the same ecosystem, but each one of these little valleys pictured has its own watershed. All right, so they're draining to different creeks, and there at the bottom you can see that this experiment was really about what happens to the water, okay, when you clear cut part of a mountainside. So all the water that, every raindrop that lands there, if it doesn't evaporate, lands in one of those treatments, winds up at its own little collection basin where they're measuring things constantly, dissolved oxygen, counting microbial species, all that kind of good stuff. So this is the scale at which research happens in some places around the world. Here they're studying watershed systems. Alright, and then we've got landscape ecology. So this is several ecosystems. Right? So we're looking at a bunch of them stuck together, and we're looking at the flow of energy at multiple adjoining ecosystems. Okay, so we're looking at how a grassland affects neighboring aquatic ecosystem, or how adding fertilizer in Nebraska affects the Gulf of Mexico fishing populations, okay, or how mountaintop removal and clear cutting affects stuff way downstream in West Virginia. Okay, so we're just going up in scale again. And finally, we've got global. Okay, doesn't get bigger than this as far as we know. There's no real ecology of the solar system. Yeah, we'll save that for later. Gets a bit esoteric and wonky. So this is as big as we get, and it's incredibly complicated. One of the problems here is that if you're looking at the entire freaking Earth, you don't have a second Earth to experiment with and make comparisons. Okay, so this can get pretty complicated, and look at all the stuff that goes into trying to look at global ecology. All right, natural fluctuations in solar output, the type of aerosols that are in the air at different altitudes, the density of those, the frequency of radiation that's coming in and going back out as heat, surface albedo, how light or dark the surface of the Earth is, changes how much solar radiation it absorbs. And then down in the bottom left there you see ocean color and wave height. All right. What in the world does that have to do with ecology at a global scale, the height of waves? Well, it actually matters. It's probably somebody's dissertation right there. Okay, if sunlight hits something directly, that item or object absorbs more of the sun's energy. If it hits it at an angle, it absorbs less, thus winter. Okay, but same thing's going on in the ocean. So if there's more waves, the ocean's actually absorbing less heat from the Earth. Okay, so this stuff gets really complicated really fast. Okay. And a lot of times in global ecology, we tend to focus on things like climate change. Obviously, that's really important. Okay, but we're trying to figure how all these things work together to make an emergent outcome. In this case, global climate change. Okay, and you can see that we're studying this on a lot of different time scales. So from hours to days to centuries. Like from hours to days, we look at lapse rate, long wave radiation, amount of water vapor that's present in a given spot, okay, clouds, for example. On the years scale, we're talking about air-land CO2 exchange, okay. And then on centuries scale, we're talking about the entire ocean circulating and mixing.